The moment I reviewed the footage from my hidden camera, a cold truth emerged. She was there again. At 10:38 a.m. on December 24th, Deborah Kensington, the 9-year HOA president, walked straight up to the mail carrier standing on my porch, introduced herself as Mrs. Holloway, and signed for my Christmas gift, as if she were the rightful owner. This was not the first time. 11 incidents over 8 months, and each time, she grew bolder. She believed her HOA title made her untouchable, that she could impersonate me in broad daylight and walk away without consequence. But what she did not know was that 10 minutes later, a USPS postal inspector's SUV would pull up in front of her house, and this time, she would not be walking away. But let me take you back to where it all started. December 18th, 6:15 p.m. The Colorado winter sun had already disappeared behind the mountains, leaving Cedarwood Estates bathed in the pale glow of Christmas lights strung along roof lines and wrapped around mailbox posts. I pulled into my driveway after a 10-hour shift at the office, my mind fixed on one thing, the package that should have been waiting on my porch. For 3 weeks, I had been tracking that shipment with almost obsessive attention. An Omega Seamaster, $6,200, meant for my father's 70th birthday on Christmas morning. He had admired that watch for 40 years, ever since he started his career as a USPS mail carrier in 1984. After 32 years of delivering packages to other people's doors, he deserved to finally receive something truly special at his own. I stepped out of my car and immediately felt the absence. The porch was empty. No box, no package slip tucked into the doorframe. Nothing but the cold concrete and the faint reflection of my neighbor's inflatable Santa swaying in the wind. I pulled out my phone and opened the USPS Informed Delivery app. Scrolling to the tracking update, the words hit me like ice water. Delivered. December 18th, 10:47 a.m. Signature obtained. I read it twice, then a third time. Signature obtained. But I had never requested signature confirmation for this package. It was standard shipping, no authorization required. Later, I would learn that USPS carriers sometimes accept signatures when a resident approaches them directly, especially if that person claims to represent the household or holds a position of authority in the community. At 10:47 a.m., I had been sitting in a conference room 15 miles away. Someone had intercepted my delivery. Someone had signed for a package worth more than most people's monthly rent. I stood there for a long moment, my breath forming small clouds in the December air, trying to process what I was seeing. That was when I heard her voice. Lost another package. The words came from my left, and something in the delivery made me pause. Too calm, too prepared, as if she had rehearsed the line before speaking it. Deborah Kensington was walking past my driveway, bundled in a cream-colored coat. Her evening patrol route taking her past my house, as it did every single day at this hour. She stopped at the edge of my property, tilting her head with concern that did not quite reach her eyes. "You really should install a camera. Ethan, porch pirates have been terrible this season. I have been telling the board we need better security, but you know how these things go." I nodded politely, not trusting myself to speak. The timing of her appearance felt rehearsed, her sympathy hollow. She smiled, wished me a good evening, and continued down the sidewalk, her heels clicking against the pavement with metronomic precision. If you have been watching from the start, let me know in the comments below. I watched her go, and a memory surfaced unbidden. 3 weeks ago, at the community mailbox cluster, Deborah had struck up a conversation while I was collecting my mail. "Expecting anything exciting for the holidays?" she had asked, her eyes flickering to the small package notification slip in my hand. I had mentioned the watch without thinking. Proud of the gift I had chosen, eager to share my excitement with anyone who would listen, she had nodded along, asking about the brand, the price, and the delivery date. At the time, I thought she was just being neighborly. Now, standing on my empty porch, with her words still hanging in the cold air, the pieces began clicking together in ways I did not want to believe. Deborah had known exactly what was coming. She had known when, and she had known the value. The question that kept me awake that night was not whether she was involved. It was how I was going to prove it. I went inside, poured myself a drink I did not touch, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop open. The USPS tracking page offered one additional piece of information I had overlooked in my initial shock, Signature image available. I clicked the link, and the screen loaded a scanned image of the delivery confirmation. The name was written in blue ink, looped and curved in a way I had never written in my life. My signature is sharp, angular, efficient, the handwriting of an engineer who signs dozens of documents every week. This was something else entirely. The letter H had a distinctive curl at the top, almost decorative, the kind of flourish that belonged to someone who had practiced their penmanship with intention. I pulled up a photo of my own signature from a recent contract and placed the two side by side on my screen. They were not even close. Whoever had signed for my package had not bothered to study my handwriting. They had simply forged the name in their own style, confident that no one would ever look closely enough to notice. That night, I started researching federal mail theft statutes. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, stealing mail with a value exceeding $1,000 crosses the threshold from misdemeanor into serious felony territory. The Omega was worth more than 6 times that amount. But I did not know all the details yet. I only knew that someone in my neighborhood, someone who walked past my house every evening with a smile and a wave, had taken something that did not belong to them, and they had signed my name to do it. The next morning, December 19th, I woke before sunrise with a plan. If someone had forged my signature to steal my package, there had to be a way to trace it back to them. I started with the most obvious step, calling USPS customer service. The automated system kept me on hold for 23 minutes before connecting me to a representative named Marcus. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, detailing the tracking number, the delivery timestamp, and the fact that I had been 15 miles away when someone signed my name. Marcus listened politely, then delivered the response I would hear repeatedly over the next several days. Sir, according to our records, the package was delivered and signed for by an individual at your address. If you believe this constitutes mail theft, I recommend contacting the USPS Postal Inspection Service. They handle federal mail crimes. He gave me a phone number, thanked me for calling, and disconnected before I could ask another question. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone number scrawled on a notepad. Federal mail crimes. The phrase felt heavy, official, like something that happened to other people in other neighborhoods, not in Cedarwood Estates, where the lawns were manicured and the holiday decorations followed HOA-approved color schemes. I decided to try a different approach before escalating to federal authorities. If this were an isolated incident, maybe the community's security system had captured something useful. I opened my laptop and composed an email to Deborah Kensington in her capacity as HOA president. The message was straightforward. I explained that a valuable package had been stolen from my porch, asked whether the community security cameras had recorded any footage from the morning of December 18th, and requested her assistance in reviewing the recordings. I hit send at 7:42 a.m. and went to take a shower, expecting to wait at least a day for a response. When I returned to my laptop 20 minutes later, an email notification was already waiting. Deborah had replied at 7:46 a.m., exactly 4 minutes after I sent my message. But it was not the speed that unsettled me. It was the language. Her message read, "Dear Ethan, I am sorry to hear about your missing package. Unfortunately, our community cameras only cover the main entrance gate and the clubhouse parking area. Individual residences are not within the camera range. I recommend installing your own security system and contacting the Denver Police Department for further assistance. Best regards, Deborah Kensington, HOA President." She had written missing package instead of stolen package, softening the crime into an inconvenience. She had preemptively closed every investigative door by specifying exactly what the cameras did not cover. And she had redirected me to the local police, knowing something I did not yet understand. The email felt less like a response and more like a prepared statement, drafted long before my question was ever asked. I followed her advice anyway, and called the Denver Police non-emergency line. The officer who took my report was sympathetic but ultimately unhelpful. Mail theft is a federal offense, he explained. It falls under the jurisdiction of the United States Postal Inspection Service, not local law enforcement. We can take a report for your records, but any investigation would need to go through them. I thanked him and hung up, feeling the bureaucratic walls closing in around me. Every door I knocked on pointed me to another door. The local police said it was federal. The federal hotline said to file a complaint and wait. The HOA said to handle it myself. Deborah had known exactly where to send me, and she had known that each redirect would cost me days. That afternoon, I cleared my schedule and spent 4 hours researching mail theft laws, with the same methodical attention I applied to engineering problems at work. What I found changed my understanding of the situation entirely. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, mail theft is a federal felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and fines reaching $250,000. The statute makes no distinction between stealing a $5 item and a $5,000 item. The act of taking mail that does not belong to you, regardless of value, is a federal crime. But prosecutors prioritize cases involving higher dollar amounts, organized theft rings, or repeat offenders. My case would likely attract attention if I could identify the perpetrator. The problem was proof. I had a forged signature, but no witness. I had a suspicion, but no footage. I had a neighbor whose email read like a legal disclaimer, but nothing that would hold up in a federal investigation. That evening, while scrolling through old HOA newsletters archived on the community website, I stumbled across something that made me sit up straight. The newsletter was from 3 years ago, a welcome message introducing Deborah Kensington as the newly elected HOA president. The biography section listed her qualifications: 12 years of experience working for the United States Postal Service before taking early retirement to focus on community leadership. 12 years. She had spent over a decade inside the postal system, learning its procedures, its vulnerabilities, its blind spots. She would know that signature verification requests take 7 to 10 business days to process. She would know that complaints filed during the holiday season get backlogged until mid-January. She would know exactly how long she had before anyone looked closely at the evidence. I read the paragraph 3 times, feeling the pieces shift into a new configuration. Deborah had redirected me to the local police because she knew they would bounce me back to federal authorities. She had bought herself at least 2 weeks of bureaucratic delay, and she had done it with a single, carefully worded email. The question was no longer whether Deborah was involved. As I scrolled further through the community forum archives, I noticed something I had missed before 6 separate posts from the past 8 months, all from different households, all asking about missing packages. Every single post had been deleted within 48 hours, and every deletion had been authorized by the same account HOA president, Deborah Kensington. December 20th began with a decision. If 6 other households had reported missing packages over the past 8 months, and if all those posts had been deleted by Deborah within 48 hours, then I was not the only victim. I needed to find those people, compare notes, and build a pattern that even the federal bureaucracy could not ignore. The community forum required HOA approval for new posts, which meant going through Deborah. Instead, I decided to take a more direct approach. I printed a simple flyer asking residents to contact me if they had experienced package theft in the past year, included my phone number and email, and spent 2 hours that morning walking through Cedarwood Estates, tucking the flyers into mailbox flags where they would be visible. By noon, I had distributed 47 flyers across the neighborhood. By 2:15 p.m., my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. The voice on the other end was Deborah Kensington, and her tone had shifted from the practiced warmth of our previous encounters to something harder, more administrative. "Ethan, I need to inform you that distributing unsolicited materials via resident mailboxes violates HOA bylaw 12.7. Additionally, your flyer implies criminal activity without evidence, which could constitute defamation under Colorado state law. I have collected the materials and disposed of them. I strongly recommend you cease this activity immediately, or the board will have no choice but to issue a formal citation." I listened in silence, my jaw tightening with each word. Something about her call bothered me beyond the legal threats. I had distributed those flyers across 17 different streets, spacing them at random intervals to avoid drawing attention. To collect all 47 in under 3 hours, someone would have needed to know exactly where to look. When I asked how she had found out, her answer was smooth. "Our neighborhood watch volunteers patrol regularly during the holiday season. Mrs. Patterson on Maple Drive noticed the flyers and alerted me. The volunteers handled the collection." It sounded plausible, but I had seen the neighborhood watch schedule posted in the clubhouse. Their next patrol was not until Saturday. That afternoon, I drove to Deborah's house. Phone calls allowed her to control the conversation, to prepare her responses, to hang up when the questions became uncomfortable. I wanted to see her face, to watch her eyes, when she could not rehearse her answers. Her home sat 4 houses down from mine, a well-maintained 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and an immaculate lawn that somehow remained green, and even in December. She answered the door within seconds of my knock, and for just a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a threat. Then the mask returned, and she smiled. "Ethan, what a pleasant surprise. Please, come in." The living room was spotless, with a leather couch, a glass coffee table, and a bookshelf lined with HOA binders organized by year. On the side table near the entrance, a sealed Amazon box sat unopened, the shipping label facing away from me. I made a mental note of its presence but said nothing. I asked her directly about the deleted forum posts. Her expression remained composed, but her right hand moved to her collarbone, fingers pressing briefly against the skin before dropping back to her lap. Those posts were removed because they violated community guidelines. When residents make public claims about criminal activity, it creates legal exposure for the association. I consulted with our attorney before taking action. I pressed further, asking why residents should not be allowed to share their experiences with package theft, even anonymously. Deborah tilted her head, and this time her response carried an edge I had not heard before. "Because people lie, Ethan. They misplace packages and blame thieves. They forget that they authorized a neighbor to collect their deliveries. And when those false accusations end up on a public forum, innocent people get hurt. I have seen it happen." Her voice softened again, but the sharpness lingered in my mind. She had not cited bylaws or liability concerns this time. She had made it personal, almost defensive, as if the accusation had struck closer to home than she intended to reveal. I changed tactics and requested an emergency HOA meeting to discuss community security measures. She shook her head before I finished speaking. "That would require 26 signatures, 30% of homeowners. With everyone traveling for the holidays, you will not reach that threshold until mid-January." She paused, then added something unexpected. "But I understand your frustration. I truly do. If you want, I can add security cameras to the agenda for our February board meeting." The offer sounded generous, but February was 6 weeks away. By then, whatever evidence existed would be long gone. Before I left, I asked about her security camera, the one mounted above her porch that pointed toward the street. Given its position, it likely captured footage of several neighboring houses. Had she checked the recording from December 18th for the first time in our conversation? Deborah hesitated. Her eyes moved briefly to the left, toward the window, then back to me. "That camera has been malfunctioning for about 2 weeks. I keep meaning to call someone, but you know how it is." The hesitation lasted less than a second, but I caught it. She had needed a moment to decide what to say. I thanked her for her time and walked back to my house, replaying every word, every gesture, every micro pause. The neighborhood watch explanation did not hold. The personal defensiveness about false accusations felt like projection, and that brief hesitation before the camera question suggested she had not expected me to ask. If the camera were truly broken, why would she need to think before answering that night? I sat by my second-floor window, staring at Deborah's house through the darkness. Part of me expected to see nothing, to discover that my suspicions were paranoid inventions of a frustrated mind. I raised the binoculars and focused on the camera housing above her porch. For 30 seconds, I saw only shadow. Then, at 8:47 p.m., a small red LED blinked steadily in the darkness. Then again. The camera was not malfunctioning. It was recording everything, and Deborah Kensington had looked me in the eye and lied about it. The morning of December 21st, I ordered 2 cameras from an electronics retailer with same-day delivery. The first was a Nest doorbell, a visible device that would mount beside my front door, where anyone walking past could see it. The second was a Wise Cam, compact enough to fit inside a decorative plant pot, with a wide-angle lens and audio recording capability. My strategy was simple. Let Deborah see the obvious camera and believe she knew what she was dealing with, while the hidden camera captured what she did not want recorded. The Nest arrived at 1:45 p.m., and I installed it deliberately, spending extra time on my porch adjusting the angle, testing the motion sensor, and checking the app on my phone. I wanted visibility. I wanted Deborah to believe she understood my defenses. By 2:30 p.m., the doorbell camera was operational. The Wise Cam would wait until dark. At 11:15 p.m., when the streetlights cast long shadows across Cedarwood Estates, I stepped outside with a ceramic planter I had purchased months ago, but never used. Inside the pot, Nestled among artificial fern leaves, sat the Wise Cam, its lens positioned to capture a 120-degree view of my porch and the walkway leading to the street. The device connected to my home Wi-Fi and began recording to cloud storage with audio. Unlike the Nest, this camera had no visible indicator light. It simply watched, silently and continuously. If someone tried to avoid the doorbell camera by approaching from an angle, the Wise would catch them. If someone stood at my door and spoke, the Wise would record every word. For the first time since this began, I was not reacting to Deborah's moves. I was anticipating them. The next morning, December 22nd, I woke to an email notification at 7:12 a.m. The sender was Deborah Kensington, and the subject line read, "Courtesy notice exterior device registration." The message was carefully worded, almost helpful in tone. "Dear Mr. Holloway, I noticed your new doorbell camera during my morning walk and wanted to remind you about CCNR Section 7.3. While security devices are generally permitted, those with recording capabilities that capture areas beyond your property line require registration with the Architectural Committee. This ensures compliance with neighborhood privacy standards. I have attached the registration form for your convenience. Please submit within 48 hours to avoid any misunderstandings. Regards, Deborah Kensington." The email was clever. She had not threatened fines or demanded removal. She had positioned herself as a helpful neighbor, guiding me through bureaucracy, but I had already downloaded the full CCNR document. Section 7.3 addressed exterior modifications that alter the architectural appearance of the residence. Doorbell cameras were not mentioned anywhere, and the registration form she attached was not an official HOA document. It was something she had created herself, requesting details about recording hours, storage duration, and camera angle specifications. She was gathering intelligence disguised as compliance. I composed my reply, citing Colorado State Law HB 19-1217, which protected homeowners' rights to install security devices without HOA approval. I noted that her registration form was not part of any official CCNR requirement and politely declined to provide the technical specifications she had requested. Then I hit send and waited. Deborah did not respond directly. Instead, she responded through action. That afternoon, the Nest doorbell recorded her presence near my property 4 separate times. But she was careful now, varying her approach each time. The first pass at 1:15 p.m., she walked her neighbor's golden retriever, pausing to let the dog sniff my mailbox while her eyes swept across my porch. At 2:40 p.m., she carried a clipboard and knocked on doors across the street, appearing to collect signatures for something, but her gaze kept drifting toward my house between conversations. At 3:20 p.m., she jogged past in athletic wear, slowing her pace as she passed my driveway, her head turning just slightly toward the doorbell. And at 4:20 p.m., she stood at the end of my street talking on her phone, her body angled away, but her eyes fixed on my property for nearly 2 minutes. She was learning the Nest's detection range, its blind spots, and its triggers. She never once looked at the ceramic planter. The next morning, December 23rd, my phone buzzed with a motion alert at 10:32 a.m. I opened the Nest app from my office and watched the live feed with growing unease. A USPS delivery truck had stopped in front of my house. The mail carrier stepped out with a small package, but before he reached my walkway, a figure intercepted him on the sidewalk. Deborah Kensington, wearing a quilted vest and holding what appeared to be an official form. The Wise Cam captured the audio clearly. "Good morning. I am the HOA Community Liaison, and I have a delivery hold authorization for this address. The resident requested temporary forwarding to the post office due to ongoing porch theft issues. Here is the reference number." She pointed to something on her clipboard. The carrier glanced at it, nodded, and typed something into his handheld device. Then he returned to his truck without delivering my package. The interaction lasted 47 seconds. I replayed the footage 5 times, my jaw tight. She had used USPS terminology, delivery hold authorization, reference number, temporary forwarding, language she would have learned during her 12 years inside the postal system. She had not stolen my package this time. She had done something more calculated. She had weaponized her institutional knowledge to redirect my mail entirely, and she had done it with a fake form and a confident smile. My hands were no longer trembling with frustration. Something colder had settled in. I was done defending. I was done reacting. Deborah had shown me exactly how she operated, and now I had 47 seconds of federal mail tampering recorded in high definition from a camera she did not know existed. The question was no longer how to protect myself. The question was how to build a case that would bring her down. The afternoon of December 23rd, I ran an experiment. If Deborah was targeting my packages specifically, she needed a method for knowing what was worth taking. The Omega had been $6,200. The redirected earbuds were $89. But what about something worthless? I ordered a phone charging cable for $12, standard delivery, arriving the next morning. If she intercepted it, she was taking everything blindly. If she ignored it, she had a filtering system I needed to understand. December 24th, 10:28 a.m. The USPS truck stopped. The carrier placed a small envelope on my porch and drove away. No interception. No Deborah with her clipboard. The $12 cable sat untouched until I retrieved it that evening. She had let it go. That single data point told me something critical. She was not stealing randomly. She was selecting. But the question that kept circling my mind was not what she was taking. It was how she knew what to take before the boxes even arrived. That evening, I logged into a neighborhood community platform using my sister's account. My own profile had been restricted after the flyer incident, but my sister's family membership still had access to the Cedarwood Estates group. I typed "missing package" into the search bar and started scrolling. The results loaded slowly, each entry in another thread in a pattern I was only beginning to see. 14 posts from 11 households over 12 months. A gaming console worth $450. A designer handbag is listed at $600. A laptop, jewelry, electronics. I stopped calculating when the number crossed $14,000. My chest tight with something between anger and disbelief. These were not random thefts. These were my neighbors, people I waved to every morning, people whose Christmas gifts had vanished from their porches while Deborah smiled and reminded them to install cameras. Every post had been deleted within 24 to 48 hours. At first, I assumed she was simply suppressing complaints. But as I studied the timestamps, a more calculated logic emerged. 24 hours was long enough for the original poster to assume no one cared, but short enough to prevent other residents from seeing the pattern and comparing notes. 48 hours was the window before screenshots could circulate, before momentum could build, before anyone organized. She was not just hiding evidence. She was isolating victims, making each one feel like their loss was an anomaly rather than part of something systematic. The moderation log confirmed what I already suspected. Every deletion had been authorized by Deborah Kensington, community administrator. I pulled up a satellite image of Cedarwood Estates and began marking addresses. The pattern that emerged made my hands pause over the keyboard. 9 of 11 households clustered within 6 houses of Deborah's property. But it was not the proximity that caught my attention. It was the angle. Every targeted home sat within direct line of sight of her porch camera, the one she claimed had been malfunctioning for 2 weeks. From that single vantage point, she could watch every delivery truck that entered our street, track which houses received packages, and note the size and shape of each box without leaving her living room. She had turned her security system into a hunting blind, and she had spent 8 months perfecting her technique. The next piece found me by accident. I was searching for replacement options for my father's watch, hoping to find another Omega at a reasonable price before Christmas morning. I filtered by location, limiting results to sellers within 50 miles of Denver. The third listing stopped me cold. Omega Seamaster, brand new, factory sealed, $4,800 or best offer. Posted December 19th, 1 day after my package disappeared. The seller's username was C. Kensington Deals. I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosting over the listing photo, and felt something shift inside me. The anger I had been containing for days crystallized into something harder, something focused. I clicked on the seller's profile. 12 other listings appeared: wireless headphones, a tablet, a designer wallet, a drone, all posted over 7 months, all described as new or unopened. The account had a 4.8-star rating with 23 completed transactions. This was not impulsive theft. This was inventory management. The username itself answered the question I had been asking. C stood for Chloe Kensington, Deborah's 24-year-old daughter. I had seen her name on the HOA emergency contact list posted in the clubhouse, paired with an email address that followed the same format. The Omega had been listed within 24 hours of being stolen, which meant Deborah had a system. She photographed items immediately, drafted listings in advance, and posted them while the victims were still filing police reports that would go nowhere. I bookmarked everything. Screenshots of the listing history, archived copies of deleted forum posts, the geographic cluster map with timestamps and values. The evidence painted a picture of systematic theft spanning 8 months, involving at least 11 households, generating over $14,000, funneled through an account linked to Deborah's own daughter. She had used her HOA position to silence complaints, her postal expertise to intercept deliveries, and her camera to surveil the entire street. My father's watch, the one he was supposed to open Christmas morning, was sitting in her house right now, photographed and priced, and waiting to be shipped to a stranger. The listing showed 4 people had already messaged the seller asking questions. One had requested to arrange pickup on December 26th. I had less than 48 hours before my father's gift disappeared forever, sold to someone who would never know it had been stolen from a porch 3 streets away. The evidence I had gathered was damning, but it was circumstantial. I needed something irrefutable. I needed her on camera, taking a package that did not belong to her, in a moment she could not explain away. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my living room, listening to the silence of the neighborhood outside, and began planning the trap. The evening of December 24th, I made the call I should have made days earlier. The USPS Postal Inspection Service operates a 24-hour hotline for reporting mail crimes, and at 7:43 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I dialed the number and spoke 2 words, mail theft. Within 4 minutes, I was connected to Inspector Marcus Webb, 18 years with the Postal Inspection Service, Denver Field Office. I gave him the summary forged signature, systematic pattern across 11 households, video of mail redirection using fake authorization, and resale account linked to the suspect's family. I kept it tight, factual, evidence-focused. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. "Mr. Holloway," Inspector Webb said, his voice measured, "what you are describing is not simple package theft. Under 18 U.S.C. Section 1708, mail theft is a federal felony carrying penalties up to 5 years imprisonment and fines up to $250,000. Based on what you have outlined, the systematic approach, the multiple victims, the resale operation, this could be prosecuted as a scheme to defraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1341. That carries even heavier penalties." I heard him writing something down. "I need you to send everything you have to my secure email tonight. The video footage, the screenshots, the geographic mapping. Once I review the file, we can discuss the next steps. But I will tell you now, what we need to build an airtight federal case is direct documentation of the suspect physically taking possession of mail that does not belong to her. Clear video, clear identification, no room for alternative explanation. Do you understand?" I understood perfectly. Inspector Webb proposed a controlled delivery operation. I would order a high-value item scheduled for morning delivery. USPS would flag the tracking number internally, so the assigned carrier knew to proceed normally while we documented any interception attempt. If the suspect took the bait, Webb and a field agent would be stationed in an unmarked vehicle on Birchwood Lane, 1 street north of my house, with a direct line of sight to my property through the connecting alley. Response time from that position under 90 seconds. "The key," Webb explained, "is matching her established pattern. High value, no signature required. Delivery window between 10 and 11 a.m. If she has operated this way for 8 months, her confidence will be her downfall." We agreed on the parameters and ended the call. I spent 15 minutes researching options before settling on a Franklin Mint silver coin collection listed at $1,850. The item shipped from a Denver area fulfillment center that operated a premium courier service on holidays for an additional fee. I placed the order at 8:22 p.m., paid $47 for guaranteed Christmas morning delivery, and forwarded the tracking confirmation to Webb's secure email, along with the evidence package he had requested. Then I verified both cameras. Nest doorbell, covering the front approach. Wise cam, hidden in the ceramic planter, capturing the walkway with full audio. Motion alerts are set to maximum sensitivity. Cloud storage is active. If Deborah approached tomorrow morning, every second would be documented from 2 angles. For the first time since this began, I was not reacting to her moves. I was engineering the moment that would end them. At 9:15 p.m., my doorbell chimed. The Nest app showed Deborah Kensington on my porch, holding a small gift basket wrapped in red cellophane. Christmas Eve rounds. I realized. The HOA president making her annual appearance at select homes, spreading goodwill and gathering intelligence in equal measure. I composed my expression and opened the door. "Ethan," she said warmly, extending the basket. "Homemade gingerbread, a little tradition in our family. I know we have had some misunderstandings lately, and the holidays seemed like a good time to reset." I accepted the basket and thanked her, keeping my voice neutral. She stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a confidence. "I noticed the delivery truck made an extra stop on your street this afternoon. Premium courier, the kind they use for expedited holiday shipments. I hope everything arrived safely. You know how unreliable things can get this time of year." She was not asking if I expected a package. She was telling me she already knew one was coming. The surveillance had never stopped. But in her confidence, she had made a mistake. She had revealed that she was still watching, still tracking, still monitoring delivery patterns on my street, even after I had installed cameras. I tilted my head and offered a small smile. "Everything has been fine so far, but I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. It is good to know someone is paying attention." Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of uncertainty that crossed her face before vanishing. She had expected frustration, defensiveness, maybe even gratitude. My calm unsettled her. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "that is what neighbors are for. Merry Christmas, Ethan." She turned and walked back toward her house, but her pace was slightly faster than when she had arrived, her shoulders slightly more rigid. She sensed something was different, but could not identify what. I watched her disappear through her front door, then closed my own and stood in the darkness of my entryway. My heart was steady, my breathing even. The fear and frustration that had driven me for the past 6 days had burned away, replaced by something colder and more precise. She had confirmed she was still monitoring deliveries. She knew something valuable was scheduled to arrive. And tomorrow morning, when she walked up to my porch with her clipboard and her confident smile, she would find Inspector Marcus Webb waiting instead of an empty house. I checked my phone one last time. Webb had confirmed receipt of the evidence file. His response was 3 words: "We are ready." I set my alarm for 6 a.m. and went to bed, knowing that in less than 12 hours, 8 months of theft, manipulation, and lies would finally come to an end. December 25th, 10:36 a.m. I stood at my kitchen window, watching the empty street through a gap in the curtains. The neighborhood was quiet. Most families still gathered around Christmas trees, unwrapping gifts and drinking coffee. My phone sat on the counter, open to the Wise Cam app. Inspector Webb had texted at 8:15 a.m. "In position. We'll hold for 10 minutes after interception to ensure the subject returns to the residence with evidence. Clean arrest. No pursuit required." The strategy was deliberate. Let her take the package. Let her carry it home. Let her believe she had succeeded. Then close the trap with nowhere to run. At 10:38 a.m., a USPS delivery truck turned onto Cedarwood Lane. The carrier stepped out holding a distinctive box with the Franklin Mint logo, $1,850 worth of bait. He walked toward my porch, and I shifted my attention to the phone screen. The Wise feed showed him climbing the steps. Then a figure appeared from the left edge of the frame. Deborah moved faster than I had seen before, intercepting the carrier with 3 quick strides. Her confidence had curdled into something closer to urgency. 8 months of success, making her careless. She held up her clipboard, angling it so the carrier could see what appeared to be a USPS delivery hold authorization form. "Good morning, Mrs. Holloway. My husband filed this hold request last week, but it seems the system did not update properly. I am authorized to receive on his behalf." The form was the same fake I had seen her use in earlier footage, but this time, she did not wait for the carrier to examine it closely. She reached for his device before he offered it, signed with quick strokes, and took the box from his hands while he was still processing the interaction. "Merry Christmas," she said, already turning away. The carrier hesitated for a moment, glancing at his screen, then shrugged and returned to his truck. The entire exchange lasted 43 seconds. I watched Deborah walk away from my porch, the Franklin Mint box tucked under her arm, but her movements had changed. Instead of the leisurely pace of previous intercepts, she walked with purpose, her head turning twice to check the street behind her. Halfway to her house, she pulled out her phone and typed something quickly, perhaps alerting Chloe, perhaps checking the resale listing, perhaps just habit. She climbed her porch steps, paused at the door to look back one more time, then disappeared inside. I noted the timestamp 10:39 a.m. Webb's 10-minute window had begun. At 10:49 a.m., a gray SUV turned onto Cedarwood Lane from Birchwood and stopped directly in front of Deborah's house. The vehicle's doors opened simultaneously, and two figures in dark jackets stepped out. The movement was sharp, official, the kind of coordinated action that draws eyes instinctively. Mr. Patterson emerged from his house first, coffee mug in hand, drawn by the SUV's abrupt stop. The Henderson family paused their morning walk. Within 30 seconds, 6 neighbors stood on porches and sidewalks, watching. Deborah opened her door before Webb reached the steps, likely alerted by the sound of car doors. She still held her phone in one hand. Inspector Webb stopped at the base of her porch. His jacket clearly marked USPS Postal Inspection Service. Deborah Kensington, I am Inspector Marcus Webb. 10 minutes ago, you signed for a package addressed to Ethan Holloway using a false identity and a fraudulent authorization form. We have video and audio documentation. The package you are holding is federal evidence. Please set it down and step outside. For a long moment, Deborah did not move. Her eyes swept across the gathering neighbors, then back to Webb, calculating options that no longer existed. When she spoke, her voice cracked in a way I had never heard before. This is harassment. I have done nothing but serve this community for 9 years. 9 years! She was not offering excuses now. She was unraveling. You have no idea what these people are like. Packages left on porches for hours, days. They do not deserve what they order. They do not appreciate anything. Webb remained motionless as her voice rose. I protected this neighborhood. I kept order, and now you stand on my lawn on Christmas morning because of a box. The female agent stepped forward with handcuffs. Deborah stumbled backward, nearly dropping her phone. You cannot do this. I know people. I know how the system works. Webb's response was flat. Ma'am, you knew how the system worked. That is why we are here. Deborah Kensington was handcuffed on her own porch at 10:52 a.m. on Christmas morning, with 8 neighbors watching in stunned silence. The female agent retrieved the Franklin Mint box from just inside the doorway. As they led Deborah toward the SUV, she kept turning her head, scanning the faces of people she had controlled for nearly a decade, searching for sympathy she would not find. I stayed at my window, watching the SUV pull away, but satisfaction was already giving way to urgency. The warrant would allow them to search the house, but the listing for my father's Omega showed a buyer arranging pickup on December 26th. That was tomorrow, if the watch had already been moved. If Chloe had hidden it somewhere outside the residence, 24 hours would not be enough. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. The search of Deborah Kensington's residence began at 11:20 a.m. on Christmas morning and lasted 4 hours. Inspector Webb called me at 3:15 p.m. with the preliminary results. Inside the house, federal agents recovered 7 packages that had never been opened, stored in the basement on metal shelving units organized by estimated value. Webb explained that Deborah had been holding items for batch listing, timing her sales to avoid flooding the market and attracting attention. My father's Omega Seamaster was on the top shelf, photographed and cataloged, scheduled for shipment to a buyer in Phoenix on December 27th, 2 days later, and it would have been gone forever. Webb told me the watch would be held as evidence until the case concluded, but he would advocate for early release given the circumstances. I thanked him and sat in my living room for a long time, processing the strange reality that my father's gift existed in a federal evidence locker instead of under our Christmas tree. Chloe Kensington was brought in for questioning that afternoon. According to Webb, she did not cooperate immediately. For the first 2 hours, she maintained that she did not know where the packages came from, that her mother had simply asked her to help sell unwanted household items. But when investigators showed her the surveillance footage of Deborah intercepting deliveries and the IP logs linking the resale account to their home Wi-Fi, something shifted. She asked to speak with a lawyer. After a 40-minute consultation, she returned to the interview room and began talking. She admitted that Deborah had been giving her packages for 8 months with instructions to photograph them, list them online, and arrange sales. Chloe kept 30%. The rest went to her mother. When asked if she knew the items were stolen, Chloe said her mother had called them abandoned and unappreciated. Whether she believed that or simply chose not to question it, she had facilitated the entire operation. The federal prosecutor offered her a deal full testimony against her mother in exchange for reduced charges. She accepted within 48 hours. News of the arrest spread through Cedarwood Estates faster than I had anticipated. By Christmas evening, 11 neighbors had texted me asking if it was true. A local television station reached out the following morning requesting an interview. I declined, offering only a written statement confirming my cooperation with the investigation. The story ran anyway, with footage of Deborah's house and quotes from unnamed residents. By noon on December 26th, a petition for an emergency HOA meeting was circulating through a neighborhood group chat that had been dormant for months. The message thread exploded with confirmations, questions, and demands for accountability. Within 6 hours, 34 households had signed, 8 more than the required minimum. The meeting convened at 7 p.m. in the Cedarwood Estates clubhouse. I arrived early and found the room already crowded with residents I had never seen at HOA functions before. By 7:15, 67 of the community's 84 households were represented. Harold Bennett, the vice president who had operated in Deborah's shadow for nearly a decade, stood at the front of the room, visibly shaken. He called the meeting to order and struggled through the first 15 minutes as voices overlapped with accusations and demands. When the chaos finally subsided, he looked directly at me. "Mr. Holloway, you are the one who brought this to light. Would you be willing to share what you know?" I had not expected to speak publicly, but I understood why it was necessary. These people needed to hear it from someone who had seen the evidence firsthand. I walked to the front of the room and kept my presentation brief. I focused on the structure of the operation rather than the details. The investigation had already revealed how the forum deletions had isolated victims, how the camera placement had enabled surveillance, how the bureaucratic barriers had protected the perpetrator. I did not show footage or name additional victims. Those stories belonged to the people who had lived them. When I finished, a woman in the third row stood up slowly. Her name was Martha Finch, 72 years old, widowed. Her hands trembled as she spoke. "I called my son last month and told him I thought something was wrong with me. Packages would vanish, and I could not explain it. He flew out from California to take me to a neurologist." She paused, her voice breaking. "He thought I was dying. I thought I was dying. And the whole time, it was her." The room went silent. 2 other families spoke after her, each confirming losses they had never connected to a pattern. The collective weight of 8 months settled over the room like a fog. The vote that followed was unanimous. Deborah Kensington was permanently removed from all HOA positions and barred from any future leadership role. The board established an independent security committee with rotating membership. 4 new cameras would be installed at key intersections. The forum moderation policy was rewritten to require a majority board vote before any safety-related post could be removed. The system that had enabled Deborah to operate undetected was being dismantled, one resolution at a time. I watched Harold Bennett read the final measure and felt something unexpected, not triumph, but exhaustion. The adrenaline that had carried me through the past 8 days was finally draining away. After the meeting, Webb called with a final update for the day. The federal prosecutor had formally charged Deborah with 14 counts of mail theft and 3 counts of mail fraud. Her arraignment was scheduled for January 2nd. Webb said the evidence was overwhelming, the documentation airtight. The prosecutor was confident enough to reject any plea deal that did not include significant prison time. Chloe's cooperation agreement had been finalized: 18 months probation and 200 hours of community service in exchange for her testimony. "This one is not going to trial," Webb said. "She has no moves left." I thanked him and ended the call. Outside my window, the street was dark and quiet, the Christmas lights on my neighbors' houses blinking softly in the cold December night. Somewhere downtown, my father's watch sat in an evidence bag, waiting. I had spent 8 days fighting to get it back, and now I had to wait even longer. But for the first time since this began, I knew the wait would end. The federal courthouse in downtown Denver was quieter than I had expected on the morning of March 15th. Deborah Kensington's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. in courtroom 4, and I arrived 30 minutes early to find a seat. The gallery was sparse, a handful of Cedarwood Estates residents, 2 reporters from local news outlets, Inspector Webb in a dark suit near the back, and Chloe Kensington sitting alone in the front row with her head bowed. Deborah was led in at 8:55, wearing an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. She had lost weight in the 3 months since her arrest. Her eyes swept the room once, pausing briefly on her daughter, then fixed straight ahead. She did not look at me. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. The federal prosecutor presented a summary of the evidence: 14 confirmed counts of mail theft, spanning 8 months, 3 counts of mail fraud related to the resale operation, and total documented losses exceeding $17,400 across 12 households. Deborah's attorney argued for leniency, citing her years of community service, her lack of prior criminal record, and her cooperation during the plea process. The judge listened without expression, then delivered the sentence: 30 months in federal prison, $47,200 in restitution to be paid to the victims, 3 years of supervised probation following her release, and a permanent ban on holding any position of authority in a homeowners association or community organization. Deborah stood motionless as the words were read. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, she shook her head once and remained silent. The bailiff led her away through a side door, and I never saw her face again. Chloe's case had been resolved separately 2 weeks earlier. Her cooperation agreement held 18 months probation, 200 hours of community service, and full repayment of her 30% share of the proceeds, which totaled $4,200. She would not serve prison time, but her testimony had been instrumental in securing her mother's conviction. I watched her leave the courtroom that morning without speaking to anyone, her shoulders hunched against the weight of what she had helped destroy. The house on Cedarwood Lane went up for sale in April. It sat on the market for 5 months before a young couple from out of state made an offer. They had no idea who had lived there before, and no one in the neighborhood volunteered the information. Inspector Webb called me on December 20th, 9 days before the 1-year anniversary of the theft. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "I have good news. The Omega has been released from evidence. You can pick it up at the field office whenever you are ready." I drove downtown that afternoon and signed the release forms in a small conference room. A clerk brought out a sealed evidence bag containing the watch, still in its original packaging, untouched since the day it had been recovered from Deborah's basement. I held it in my hands for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything that small box represented. On December 24th, exactly 1 year after Deborah Kensington had signed my name and walked away with my father's gift, I placed the Omega Seamaster in his hands. He sat in his favorite chair by the window, the same chair where he had spent 32 years reading mail carrier routes and planning his days. He opened the box slowly, his weathered fingers trembling slightly, and stared at the watch without speaking. "You carried other people's packages your whole life," I said. "It is time someone delivered something to you." He looked up at me with tears in his eyes, and for the first time in a year, I felt the weight finally lift. That evening, I stood on my porch as the sun set behind the mountains. The Nest doorbell blinked green beside my door. The ceramic planter sat empty now, the hidden camera long since removed. A USPS truck rolled past, and the carrier waved. I waved back. 4 houses down. The "For Sale" sign had been replaced with "Sold." The December air was cold, but my porch was no longer empty. Some things, it turns out, find their way home. If this story reminded you that justice still exists when you refuse to stay silent, consider supporting this channel. Every like, every share, every subscription helps us bring more stories like this one to light. Stories of ordinary people standing up against those who abuse their power. Stories where patience, evidence, and persistence win over manipulation and greed. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Karma Fence community, because sometimes the fence that keeps karma in check is built by people like you.